You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Batuta Advocate radio show, recording down in downtown Batuta here at the Old City District, Budgie Smuggler Studios. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall, editor of the Batuta Advocate, and of course Errol Parker, editor at large. How are you, Errol?
Good, mate. Beautiful day up here in the Channel Country. Crystal clear skies. Just had a drop of rain. Wildflowers will be en route.
Yeah, it's a good time of the year. It's about to get very hot, so take it in. Take it in while you can. And today's guest is beaming live straight out of the Wollongong hinterland, I guess you could call it, down there in in the Southern Highlands of Sydney, Southern Highlands of New South Wales. Jimmy Barnes, thank you for joining us.
How are you, gentlemen?
Very good as always.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you got the internet out there.
Yeah. The satellite, Sky Master satellite.
The interweb.
Yeah. We've been trying to get Bardsy on for a while on the Batuta Advocate radio show, and like a lot of the big guests we've been getting lately, COVID's been great for that because, as we see, Bardsy knows how to use a Zoom. He can do it from his living room. And,
well, actually, to tell you the truth, one of the kids had to come set it up.
Yeah.
I got to own up to it straight away, you know?
Yeah. You've been doing a fair bit of music at home. We've seen...
Yeah. Me and the missus, Jane decided 7 months ago when the whole place closed down that she's going to learn guitar.
Yep.
And she's been sitting in there churning, practicing for hours every day and just churning that song. So it's great. Every night we get out, we're just doing it very, very amateur hour, just with an iPhone. That's surprising how good it sounds.
Yeah. Deep in the lockdown as well, that started too. So, I mean, when everyone was trying to find ways to kill time, we were getting videos coming out of the Barnes household where the whole family was singing. You had the...
Yeah, well, that's, there's no shortage of bloody entertainers. And, all the kids all sing, the grandkids sing. It's good. They all play something, so it's good.
Yeah.
Now, tell us, you've just released a book. I mean, this is a quick turnaround. You've been busy in COVID. And you've also played a few gigs.
Yeah, I've done a couple of gigs, but, listen, I've been sort of writing the last 4 years. Before I wrote the first couple of books, and I just didn't stop. I just sort of kept writing little bits and pieces. Mm-hmm. And I decided late last year that I was going to, write some short stories, and I had a couple of ideas already down. And my plan was I was going to go and take a bloody holiday because I'd just toured for about 4 years and write a book while we traveled. But of course, we left here, got to Thailand, where my wife's from, and the whole world sort of shut down around us, and we had to turn around and come back, which was great because, I've got to tell you, the hinterland of Wollongong is looking pretty bloody good at the moment.
Yeah. Bit of rain.
So what made you...
a bit of rain cold.
What made you get into writing so prolifically? Like, obviously, you've written a lot of good songs, a lot of songs. It's one thing to write an album, it's another thing to write thousands of pages of your own story.
It's one of those things where the first couple of books really, it was like, buddy, it was like therapy for me. It was a whole pile of stuff that I had to get out, and whether I just wrote it down and then burnt it, it was just to get it out for myself. And after I wrote it out, I started writing, and I realized that some people were actually getting something from it, and people liked it. And I just enjoyed the process. And I bloody, I like telling a story. I like telling a yarn anyway. So, just sitting at the computer, and I remember nearly everything. It's surprising when you think about what I've done to myself, but I remember most things, and to sit there and try and focus on it and then fill in the gaps is a lot of fun anyway. Just sitting there trying to write like Don Walker. If I'm doing a conversation with Don Walker, of course I don't remember what he said word for word, but I know exactly how he speaks with that sort of North Queensland drawl, and I can fill in the gaps and make it fun. So it's sort of, it's entertaining for me, and it's just sort of something I'm really great at. I'm just going to keep doing it. I really enjoy it. It
is interesting to be able to view it that way, where it's your memoirs or it's your stories, and this is how I think it went down. It's great to be able to share that story.
That's what a memoir is, It's your story from your perspective and what you remember. It's not anybody else's. One of the things I noticed when I wrote the first working class boy, I had to really lay it out clear. I had to make sure I didn't tell anybody else's story. I've got 5 siblings, and I didn't want to tell their story. I can only tell it from what I see, and that's the important thing when you're doing this. And so I just write it from my perspective, and if people don't like it, they get their own fucking book. You like to say that on the Batuta?
Absolutely.
Say whatever you want.
I trust
We
you've
haven't
read,
got any bosses here.
Yeah, you've
That's
read.
good.
You might have read a few of our articles. Actually, we.
I have. I have.
It was during the plebiscite when Tony Abbott came out and said that we shouldn't be playing political music at the NRL Grand Final with Macklemore, and just the year before you'd sung Kaysan.
Yeah, no. Tony's the last person to get anything.
Yeah.
Really, I'm not sure of anything actually.
Who are some of the authors that really inspired you to get into writing, your own fiction?
I've only just started writing fiction. I like all sorts of, you've got like Stephen King and stuff like that. But I've been reading like Truman Capote and Joan Didion and people like that. And I like that sort of, I like fiction based on facts. So I think a lot of the stuff I'm going to write is going to be sort of, they all say you've got to write what you know. So I'm going to try and, I'll probably write some horror stories based on my own life, because I've lived a few. I've met a few, come to think about it.
You mentioned before it was Working Class Boy was one book you released, and then followed up by Working Class Man.
Yeah.
And that kind of Working Class Boy kind of tells the story of passage to Australia for your family.
Yeah.
And you were a youngster in Scotland.
Yeah, I left Scotland when I was 5.
You have memories of the life and times?
Really, it's ridiculous, really vivid. I actually, long before I started writing the book, I remember I said to my mum, I keep remembering this house. And I drew pictures of this room, and I said, "Where is this? Where do you think there's this sort of layout? What sort of house was this? Where were we?" And she said, "You couldn't possibly remember it. You left there when you were 10 months old or something like that." So I remember real vividly, lots of things. I remember this room with a combustion stove and the bed sunk into the back. And she said it was a kitchen that we lived in 1956. So it's right, which is pretty, considering I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, it's pretty cool. But I remember a lot in Scotland. There's a lot of real vivid memories, and a lot of it was pretty dark, because there was Glasgow is a tough place, and within my family there was a lot of violence and a lot, like my dad was a boxer and his dad was a fighter, and they were both like bouncers and standover men and all this sort of stuff. And so there was a lot of violence around where we came from, and so I've got very dark, real, I could taste the place. It's really right in front of me. And every time I went back to Scotland, I get the same feeling. I get this feeling of doom and gloom. Yep. And it wasn't until I wrote those books and I sort of let go a lot of that shit that I go back to Glasgow, and it's still just as dark, it's still just as dangerous. but I can actually sort of sit with the place now. I love it.
Yeah. We interviewed on the Batuta Advocate radio show about a year or so ago, James Rain, and he was telling us about the surf rock to the pub rock scene and just the things that were going on around him while he was coming up as a musician.
Yeah.
And he referred to Adelaide and South Australia, the music coming out of there. I don't think this is a commonplace terminology, but he said, and you had all the 10-pound poms coming out of Adelaide. Was it like that? And it's not just in music.
Absolutely.
Was it like that?
Because Adelaide, particularly Elizabeth, where I grew up, there was all the immigrants were stuck there, and there was a lot of the bands. You see, the reason there was a lot of Adelaide bands, whether it's the Twilights in the early days, the Masters Apprentices, the Angels, Cold Chisel, a lot of the bands that came out of that stemmed from immigrants. Steve and I and Chisel were both Brits. We'd hear, particularly in the '60s, I think bands used to hear music. The 10-pound tourists would come over, they'd all go to Elizabeth, and they'd have the newest records in it. And it would take 6 months to get records to come to Australia in those days. So bands like in Adelaide were playing these songs live, and they were like way ahead of their time. So a lot of the bands had that really early British rock influence, and it permeated the whole thing. And so the whole Adelaide rock scene was really quite a prolific sort of scene, and people really there was a lot of great bands came out there, a lot of great musicians. And the great thing about Adelaide too is the bands could play there, and because it was so far away from anywhere really, the eastern states where the music scene sort of was happening, people would know about you. So you could go there, you could fuck up, you get yourself together, get the band so it was cooking, and then move to the eastern states.
Yeah, right.
And you'd go there and they'd go, "Here's a new band," and you'd be playing for 5 years.
Yeah, you're ready made.
It was good. So Adelaide
just
tough.
Just the oven. Adelaide's the oven.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they were a tough audience too. And you know, we played a couple of pubs in Adelaide, like a place called the Largs Pier, which I've spoken about a lot, which was as rough as guts, but a great rock and roll audience. If they liked you, they were gonna, you know, they'll go through thick, you know, hell and high water for you. But if they didn't, they'd kill you. So you know, you have to play good.
Yeah. Do you think any sort of young bands could have that same experience now, or you know,
it's a different experience now. You know, there's a lot of stuff that young bands have got going for them as far as, you know, being able to promote themselves online, get music anywhere in the world instantaneously. You know, like you can drop it, and if you can get through the right people. Whereas we didn't have that, and we just had to play night after night in pubs and clubs. You know, like I think it's a tough thing for young bands to become great live bands, because, you know, you hear about bands like DMAs, we were talking about them before.
Right.
You know, they're really good because they play a lot of live gigs. You know, you've got to play live to get to cut your teeth doing that. And that's what that was what the backbone of this whole Australian, they called it the pub rock scene, you know, whether it was the Oils, Angels, you know, Rose Tattoo, AC/DC. We all cut our teeth playing to hostile audiences in pubs with drunken crowds. Yeah. And you had to really get your shit together, otherwise they'd kill you. So, and it really made your bands really tight. There's definitely a flavor that Australian bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s sort of had, which sort of started to change when all the clubs shut down. You know, we used to play clubs that were, you know, licensed for 300 people, and they'd have 2,000 people in there, you know. It was a death trap, you know. Yeah. So I wouldn't advise it, but it worked for the bands.
It's interesting that you say that the crowds used to be hostile. I mean, like now, when you go and see a rock and roll show, you know, you've obviously paid some good money for it, and you want to go there and have a good time. Why do you think the crowds were so hostile back in the day? You know, especially in pub rock.
I just think there was a bit of a thing going where, you know, there was, you know, I know early in our careers, people sort of thought that anything that came from overseas was better than what we had here. Yeah. There was a bit of everybody had a bit of a chip on their shoulders, and we'd go out of our ways to make sure that that they didn't leave with the same impression. I mean, and there's also, you'd have to play, and part of the licensing laws in the 70s where they used to have to serve a meal, you know. Yeah. That's how they let people stay late. So they'd serve a meal while you're playing, and I'd be fucked if I was going to let anybody eat while I was singing, you know. So you know, it was hostile probably because I was hostile to them, you know. but they were just tough crowds. I mean, they knew what good music was, and there was an abundance of good rock and roll bands in this country that were playing every night. And if they didn't like you, they'd walk out the door and go to another pub and see Rose Tattoo.
The pubs were full either way.
Everywhere. Everywhere the pubs were packed. Yeah. And the bands were getting, you know, you get out and you can play. We used to play 8 gigs a week, you know. That's outrageous, you know.
We used to hear that about, you know, well before certain laws might have been invented in the way of driving around town. But yeah, you'd hear those stories, whether that be in St Kilda or Bondi Beach, with 5-6 gigs a night, just loading up.
Yeah. Absolutely. We used to do a gig in Melbourne, for instance. Melbourne there was a lot of pubs to play. We'd play a pub at lunchtime, you know, on a Saturday. We'd play a pub at lunchtime. We'd do an early spot at 7:30 in a club supporting one of the big Melbourne bands, you know, Daddy Cool or something. And then we'd play at 3 o'clock in the morning in a place called Bananas in St Kilda. And literally, you know, I'd be really good in the first gig at lunchtime. By the second one, I was getting a bit bleary-eyed and a bit out there. And by the third one, they'd carry me in, you know, never mind when we left the place. So it was pretty wild scene. It was good, you know. I mean, you learn how to think on your feet, you know, and get by. You know, there was a lot of smoke and mirrors. If you couldn't sing anymore, you'd just trash the place and make, you know, put on a show.
Well, earlier this year, Jimmy, I was in Belfast, and we managed to catch a show by an American rapper called The Game. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but during the course of his performance, he consumed an entire bottle of vodka in one sitting. He didn't come up for air. Would you have any advice to him about you know, like what he should be doing moving forward? I mean, I don't know how hard it would be to perform a live show after you've just done that to yourself.
But I used to do it every night.
Yeah, well, how?
I don't know. You know, and I used to, because I think the adrenaline kept you going. And, probably, you know, assisted by some other chemicals and stuff like that. But, you know, I wouldn't advise it. Put it that
Yeah.
way. But I did it for years. I mean, I used to drink a bottle of scotch and a bottle of Drambuie on stage, just during an hour and a quarter show. And I'd mix, bloody, what they call drinks in my mouth. It was just full on. But you can do it, I've seen shows where people are just so wasted that's sort of part of the entertainment. I remember I went and seen Iggy Pop in London.
Yeah.
We played, Chisel played at this club, this little theatre thing in London. The guys who were the stagehands said, come tomorrow night, Iggy Pop's playing. I said, oh, yeah, I'd love to come. They said, he's doing 2 shows. He's doing one at 8 o'clock and one at midnight. Come to the midnight one. So I thought, okay. And I walked in, and no kidding, Iggy was so wasted. He was just trashed. And I got there, he just walked on stage, and I'm looking at him, he's not usual. He's ripped and he's got the shirt off, but he's cut from head to foot, and I said, what happened to him? And apparently he was so out of it. He was pacing around the dressing room, and this bloke kept staring at him, so he dived at him, and it was a mirror. It was awesome. He was just monumental. One of the best shows I've ever seen. But he was wasted, but he was just intense and on the money.
It was part of the performance.
So somehow people managed to do it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can do it.
What do you?
And I don't know how big hip hop is in Belfast and in Dublin either. So
there was a lot of metal detectors at the door. Put it that way.
It was a very intimate gig. It was
Ulster Hall with metal detectors.
I've played Ulster Hall. I played there many times.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the whole touring aspect of it? I mean, you're still doing it to this day. I mean, COVID pending. We've done a couple live shows, and you kind of do a bit more moving around, as you'd know, with when you've released a book or something like that. We did a stage show a year or so ago, and we didn't do too many. We did, 6 shows in the space of a month.
That's 8.
Yeah.
8 shows in the space of a month, some back-to-back in different cities. And even we felt, the airport food and the booze was enough to slow us down.
It wears you down.
But I know you would have done way more than that. And I'm thinking, how were you as a young man in your mid to late 20s? What would you do? How would you end something like that? Because I can imagine you were absolutely fucked after 20 shows in different countries with a rider out the back every stage. Like, there's one thing to be fucked on stage, but to be rooted at the end of a tour. What would you do?
We didn't even think about it, because to tell you the truth, we would sort of finish a tour here, then go to New Zealand and do a tour, go to Europe and do a tour, go to America, do a tour, and you'd finish in America and they say, oh, we've booked you a new tour in Australia. So you come back, and it was sort of, just what you did. There must have been 20 odd years where we just went back to back to back to back, it was just non-stop. And you get match fit.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Right.
It takes about 8 shows, but you do get match fit. Yeah. And that's being able to pick yourself up, and a lot of that's, like I said, is adrenaline, and a lot of it's got to do with just, you get out in front of a crowd and you've got to put it on.
Yeah.
You can't get out there and not deliver. That's otherwise you don't have a job. So you get up there and the audience, the energy of the crowd sort of drives you. Yeah. And once you get match fit, you get up there and it's just switch it on and bang, hit them hard. Hit them hard, hit them low. If they get up, hit them again.
Yeah. With your books, you've kind of went from working class boy that kind of followed you through, early days in Glasgow, then Adelaide, and then into music. And then Working Class Man tells a story of, the man, and of course, the songs that came, including Working Class Man. How do you deal with this thing that very few Australians would have, where such a large part of the population, Australia, would feel like you wrote that song about them?
I know. Working Class Man, for instance.
Yeah.
I was doing an interview earlier on the radio, a big radio station, and they said to me, you've written such iconic songs. As when you wrote that line, well, she loves, a little woman, and I go, I didn't write that song. Yeah. I'm a singer. Yeah. Jonathan Cain wrote that song, But it's a weird thing, just being in Chisel, for instance, being such a part of people's lives. It's really weird. People don't come up to me gushing and screaming like I'm not Justin Bieber, Yeah. But they come up and they feel like they know me because I've grown up in front of them. Yeah. I've spent 40 years, playing at their bloody weddings, at their, they play their records at their kids' funerals, at their bloody parties, at their 21st. Yeah. And so people come up to you and just, they come up and say good day, and just, it's a weird feeling, but people feel like they know you. And in a way they sort of do, because what you do, you lay it out there every night, and sometimes, it gets annoying, because you really, they might know you too well, or they get too familiar, or you just, you go out for dinner I go out for dinner with my wife, and you're sitting having a romantic dinner, and somebody comes up and say, "Oh, can I take a photo with you?" And,
to the table.
She's not happy. They're not really happy. And you're just saying, "I know you hate this, but I'm going to do it anyway." And by the way, can you sign my wife's ass? Really, it's not good. It's not romantic.
But do you think it'll ever get old? Do you think you'll ever get tired of being, everyone's kind of go-to?
You know what? I get tired of it all the time, but it just, I enjoy singing, and when I try my best not to be a celebrity. There's people who always want to be celebrity. Come on here and be on this show and do. I'm a rock and roll singer. That's what I do. When people come up and act stupid, then I just say, back off. I'm not bloody. Like I said, it's not Justin Bieber. I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a singer. What do you want? If you want me to sing something, I'll do it and get it out of my face.
You're also not a role model.
No, that's right, exactly right. But people sort of know that, and they can tell. Once they come up close, they'll leave you alone. And I just enjoy singing. The point is, every night I get up on stage, I don't regret, being a singer ever. I get up there, and it brings me joy. It makes, I get to, exercise demons every night. It's like primal therapy every night of the week. I get to get in touch with feelings that most people don't get a chance to, just by you access them when you're singing. So I see it as a gift, and I don't think it's ever really gonna, get tired for me.
Do you ever sit there? I mean, this is an interesting question, but you would know the places you could go where you would be probably most loved. Do you ever feel like, do you ever get up, maybe the missus is out of town, you think, I'm going to go beat Jimmy Barnes tonight and walk in the front bar of the, Bundanoon Hotel?
No, I've sort of avoided that for a long time, but there's times when your mates have come up and said, "Oh, let's go for a beer," and you walk into the fucking Bondi Hotel or something. You go, "Oh, why did I do this?" But you get sort of smart enough not to do that. I'm sure it'd be cool in Batuta. I could walk in anytime. The other thing that's really annoying. This is one of the annoying things about being a celebrity. When people walk up to you and go, "You're Jimmy Barnes, aren't you?" I go, yeah. And they go, "No, you're not. No, you're not." I go, "No, I'm not. No, yeah, you are. Only he would say he is." And I go, "Fuck off, leave me alone." What do you want me to do?
Oh, that's good stuff. Did you and the band foresee this working class icon status? I mean, as you said, you're rock and roll stars. You're not painters and dockers.
Nah.
But then
I think what it was was from the early days, Chisel. Once we put records out, there was a lot of people that were making a lot of money off of rock and roll bands and off of punters. And when Chisel started, there was a booking agency called Dirty Pool that our management started, along with the management of the Angels and the management of Ice House, and they formed this management team who started doing door deals, right, and stuff like that. So what we could do was, instead of paying, $100,000 to the agent, you could and making $5,000 for the band or something, you could make $20,000, and you could drop the ticket price. The punters were looked after. So we just always had this thing about, looking after punters. Yeah, right. So people used to ask us why we did it. And it was self-preservation. We knew that if we looked after people who were coming to see us, they'd keep coming back. But the other thing was, I'd been a punter. I'd been a young punk in Adelaide, just wanting to go to gigs and couldn't afford to get in, and I'd have to kick doors in and shit like that. So we kept it sort of. We kept our coaches will always kept the price of our merch down. We made, when I went solo, I made, Working Class Man album just because I wanted to give something back. People support you and give you this lifestyle, and if you go out there and just milk it for all you can, people don't like it. So, and they'd ask me why I did that, and I said, well, I was born, in a working class family. That doesn't come out of you just because you made a bit of money. This is burnt into my fucking veins. I remember every minute when we struggled, and you just try and keep that in mind and keep yourself grounded. And remember, you're only a singer. That's all you do. And
it's better if the punters are down there behind the the soundies rather than down you up in the pub.
Exactly. I like it when they're down there. I can see what they're up to.
Yeah. Now tell us, what are you thinking musically? I mean, you've obviously spent a lot of time writing. How do you keep creative? You're looking fit, by the way. I just mentioned.
Yeah, I'm pretty fit at the moment. I'm good.
So does that all play into itself?
Well, I think the healthier you are, especially I'm 64.
Yeah.
So for me to be out, I still want to go out there. I think that the best music I'm going to make is still to come.
Yeah.
I think that I've still got a lot to do, and to do that, I've got to be fit. I've got to be, I want to go up on stage and not go up there and collapse in a heat. I want to be better than I've ever been every time I get up.
Yeah.
So I've got to keep doing it. And I found that the healthier I am, the clearer I am, the more creative I am. I used to think, for years I did so many gigs wasted, and in fact, for a long time, you could have counted on one hand the amount of gigs I did not wasted. So I got to the point where I thought I couldn't do a gig unless I was completely hammered.
Yeah.
And then when I finally started doing gigs sober and straight, it was like this revelation. I went, oh my God, I've been nobbling myself for 30 years,
Yeah.
So I find I'm more creative. I've got more energy, more drive to work, and just more. I've got more options now. So I think you've got to keep fairly healthy if you want to last. Yeah. I've got a lot of things I want to do. At the moment, I'm writing a solo record. I'm in the process of writing that. Yeah. I've got the book out now, the third book. I've got 2 different fictions that I'm starting to work on to write.
Yeah.
I'm making a rockabilly record with Chris Chaney from The Living End and Slim Jim Phantom from the Stray Cats, and we're in the process of making an album with the Australian Chamber Orchestra. Right. So the idea is keep yourself busy, keep moving forward, and keep trying new things.
Yeah. What are you doing? Are you on a bike? How are you keeping fit, or is that just the performing?
No, part of it's performance, but I do Pilates. I get in the gym. I used to do martial arts for years and stuff like that, and I get up and kick and belt things and do all that sort of shit. As I got older, I just find that all my joints are too sore from hitting things. So I do Pilates and I've done yoga. I do anything to keep fit. Walk, swim, anything I can do. But I think you just got to keep yourself active. Otherwise, you just you especially after the lifestyle I've led, you'd be in a heap on the floor.
Jimmy, just a few more questions before we go. Just back to Killing Time. There's a lot of different types of stories in here. I mean, like from everywhere, from up in Memphis all the way down to a Coral Island, somewhere off the coast of Australia. What process did you go through to come up with the stories that you were going to write for this book? You've lived a very long and interesting life.
Yeah. I've still got a lot of stories. I think I just sat over the months leading up to writing. I remember I must write about this, and I put it into my phone, in a note on my phone. And a lot of those I didn't get to because when I sat down and wrote, other things would come to me. I tried to make this book a bunch of stories that weren't really related to each other. Yeah. But I found by the end of it that they all seemed to be related in some way or another. And even stranger, I found that they all related to the other 2 books. So, life's got a way of, when you're traveling along, just ignoring everything, of putting big red flags up saying you should be doing this or you should see this and change this. And a lot of those markers I didn't see because I was so wasted. A lot of the stories, I guess, it's still sort of cathartic, therapeutic for me to write them because there was stuff, I wrote stories like there's a story in the book. It's called A Curse on You. And I remember this day vividly. I was in America. It was in the mid-90s. I was in America and I was really wasted at the time. And I was leaving the recording studio in a limousine and driving home. And I wanted to get a bottle of vodka, right? So I got the limo to pull into this little strip mall in Los Cienega, and I knew the bottle shop was there because I'd seen it right next door to it. There was this fortune teller shop, right? And the fortune tellers had the red velvet curtains and had a crystal ball on a table with a light on it. It looked like a set from the Munsters, so I'd seen it, but I knew there was a bottle shop there. So that's why I stopped. And I remember the limo pulled in, and I fell out of the limo. I looked like something, that movie Arthur? It looked like that. And anyway, so I fell out and I staggered in to the bottle shop. I thought there was 2 doors right next to each other, and I'd walked into the fortune teller by accident, right? I swear this is what happened. And as soon as I walked in, I shut the door and it all went sort of quiet and muffled in front of this. Red velvet curtains everywhere. There's candles burning. I thought to myself, what a weird bloody bottle shop this is, And this woman walks out from behind a curtain and she's in red silk robes and scarves tied around. She looked like the guitar player from Bruce Springsteen's band. Yeah. But little Stephen, Yeah. I know Stephen. I'm going, is that you, Steve? And she came towards me and I realized what I'd done. I thought, oh, fuck, I'm in the wrong shop. And she's going, I must talk to you. And I'm going, yeah, no, I got to get out of here. I just wanted to get back to the bottle shop, And she's going, there's a curse on you. And I'm saying, tell me something I don't know. Oh, look at me. Look at the state I'm in, And I kept backing up. And I got to the door and she said, someone very close to you is trying to kill you. And by that point, I'm going, thanks, but I got to go. And I backed out the door. I then got the bottle of vodka and I forgot about it, right? I was sitting writing this book and that story came to me and I thought about it. It's one of those moments where there was a big flag. She was absolutely right. Somebody was trying to kill me and it was me. And I should have known because I was going, at that state, I was still going to buy a bottle of vodka. So a lot of the stories are like that. They're sort of, they're connected to either my growth or my self-destruction, but depending when you look at it.
Can you see any of these ending up on the screen or just any of your writing in general ending up on the screen?
Listen, who knows? I mean, I like the idea of that, but, listen, I don't write them for that. I just write them. Mainly I write them to get them out, and it's entertaining. I write these things. Some of them I sit and write, and I just have a laugh to myself, And then somebody goes, oh, that's really good. My wife said, oh, you can't say that. There's a few things you have to edit because the other thing is, you write things and you go, and this bloke was there and he's a fucking idiot, So you have to be very careful what you say about people and how you describe situations. I've been lucky enough. I just write it for myself, and if anybody likes it, they can do what they like with it, as long as they run it past my missus first.
Yeah, that's it. You're talking about how much of a fuckwit this bloke is. She goes, just remember, he's coming over for dinner next week.
He's coming for dinner. He's coming for dinner next week. Oh shit! Right now. And I've done it. Because the people you meet. I've met some very funny, really great people. But I've also met some absolute idiots. I remember being like in Los Angeles. It was full of them. You go there, and I remember being in a bar in Los Angeles and. This guy was this big rock star at the time who remained nameless, but what's his name? I forget mainly because I can't remember his name. But he wrote this song called The Stroke, right? And he's just a fucking lunatic out there, And he's trying to tell me how he was the best thing in rock and roll ever, And he's had one song, and I think I ended up sort of carrying him out by the throat and putting him outside the bar and say, just stay there and keep out of my face. That'll be your last hit, But you just meet idiots all the time. You come across them and you have to be able to recognize, because a lot of people will bring something good to you. I've met some people who are horrible, who can write great songs. I've met people who you'd think would be complete assholes, who are just geniuses and really, really cool. So you've got to keep an open mind and you try not to burn too many bridges when you're writing books.
I mean, obviously this is something we can all enjoy thinking about in COVID because no one's going anywhere. But where would you say that your secret fans are outside of Australia? New Zealand, there's a lot in
Scotland.
Yeah, a lot of Scotland.
A lot in Scotland.
Yeah.
There's New Zealand is a big part of us. We toured. I started touring New Zealand in about 1975 with Cold Chisel. And we've been going back there regular ever since. Sort of different crowd to Australia, but they love rock and roll. They love the blues.
You played with Bruce there the other day, didn't you?
Yeah, we played with Bruce on his last tour there. Yeah, it was really awesome. I played there heaps. I love New Zealand. But Germany. Germany, they love rock and roll in Germany. We go there, Sweden, Poland, a little bit in France, America. America people know who I am. They're not sure why, but they know to be afraid. They know enough to be afraid. But they've sort of cult following there. But Europe is probably where Cold Chisel and myself sort of sold more records outside of Australia. A little bit in America, but more Europe, Germany particularly, which is the second biggest rock and roll market in the world. And they have those mega festivals in Germany, just 300,000 people plus. Really outrageous festivals.
I suppose your career would have been really starting to lift as they were opening up too, in Germany. They would have. The wall comes down, and you guys were.
But we were going there, and we actually went and played in places like Leipzig, or what it's called, which was on the other side of the wall. And you go into these places, and they're dull and grey, and you can really see they've been worn down by by communism and the weather, and there's nothing going on. And you get up and play, and the audiences just go nuts, because they've been suppressed, oppressed the whole time, So suddenly they can get free and really cut loose. So I mean, it's good to see that change in the places, but at the same time, I've done gigs in Germany where are these guys like white supremacists or something, like really, you're playing with sort of heavy metal bands, and you go, I think they're the wrong audience for me,
Yeah.
So but they're just, it's a big country. There's all sorts of people there, and they just love to rock, so you get out there and just play your music. But Scotland, they love me because I was born in Glasgow, and you go back there, and the Scots love any Scotsman who's done well somewhere else. They really love it. So, so they've sort of adopted me back again.
Yeah. You were born there, so they can claim it. But I'm sure they'd have you even if you weren't.
Yeah. But they like rock and roll there too. I mean, they're not. They've got that, but I do. They're like,
Well, we like it here too in Batuta. Jimmy, we love you, right?
Invite me up, I'll come and sing, all right?
Yeah, we'll get
come
you.
And sing in the local club.
Yeah. On the way out,
have you got a club?
Well, yeah, we do. We've got heaps, but I suppose the next opportunity would be the Big Red Bash next year. If you want to.
That'd be good. I've done that. That's really
come
good.
Out again. Yeah.
I love it, mate. I played there a couple of times. That's a good spot out there with the big sand dune.
Yeah, we're 2.5 hours on the most unsealed road in Australia from there. So
well, let's go. It's going to be good country there.
It's good. It's good, and the Batuta Hotel's back up and running again too. So we'll keep in touch. But for the meanwhile, we'll be reading your book, Killing Time by Jimmy Barnes.
All the best, guys. Nice to talk to you.
You too. Thanks for joining us, mate.